All right, guys, so we're back for our second episode, and currently it's the nameless podcast because we haven't come up with a name yet.
Mm-hmm.
But we will start by introducing ourselves a little bit more formally with a little bit more information. So I'm Sean, and I live here in the greater Boston area. And for the last 3 years, I have been working as a personal small group and large group teacher slash trainer in mostly strength and conditioning and CrossFit, and yeah, I guess that kind of generally covers it. And I've recently become more interested in movement in a more broad way, so incorporating kind of concepts of yoga and developmental movement and things like that. So that's kind of where I'm at. And Rob?
Yeah, so my name's Rob. I'm also in the greater Boston area. I am a personal trainer, and I also work as a structural integrator, which is a form of manual therapy and body work. I do a lot of individual training sessions. I do some small group training, about like 2 to 5 people. And I've kind of been around the exercise and fitness industry for a while, over 10 years now, and I've explored. I've been a part of like all the different trends: the bodybuilding, the group classes, the endurance, the powerlifting, the CrossFit, the Olympic weightlifting, the gymnastics. So I've seen kind of and been a part of myself, like, of these different trends. And fast forward to today, and I'm really interested in kind of alignment-based principles, like how can somebody unify with gravity a little bit better, and how can their joints feel better. So I'm mainly interested in reshaping people's tissues and their behaviors and their habits, their physical habits, in ways that are conducive to healthier, happier joints every day. So, Sean and I like to kind of talk about what we see happening in the exercise and fitness industry. Wouldn't you say that that's kind of like what we do? We get together and we talk about that?
Yeah, I would agree. We do it in a more unstructured way, which brings us to kind of our second point, which is the first one being that we were going to introduce ourselves. So that was some feedback that we got. So we'll probably continue to add layers to that over time. That's not the end of it. And then to be a little bit more structured in our conversation, so we're going to try to keep the conversation within a certain topic here and do our best to confine it to that. And if we get off on a tangent, we'll try to bring it back. But we'll see how that goes. And the topic is what, Rob?
So today we're going to talk about exercising yourself into a box. All right, so literally finding an exercise routine or a class or something that you like to do, and how that might literally put yourself into a box. It might start to inhibit certain parts of your body, limit the way that your anatomy functions, the way kind of your physiology works, and why we see it so often, right? Like, we see it everywhere. I mean, I've even been a culprit of exercising myself into a box until I eventually, got injured, and I was like, I want to get out of this box, free me, which is still a work in progress. So that's what we're going to talk about today.
Yeah, I want to clarify just a little bit, because we didn't know if it was obvious what that means in terms of what it means to exercise yourself into a box. But at least the way that I'm going to think about it is there's a huge spectrum of movement variation. You could move your hip up, and you could rotate it, and you could move it to the side. And there's these 3 planes of movement: forward, backward, side to side, and then around. And there's all sorts of ways that you can move. And there's these different expressions. So if you were to watch a dancer, they can do all these different things. And you were to watch a baseball player, they can do all these different things. And a gymnast, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But if you reinforce one of those things. So say you play a single sport for a long period of time, and you get a diet of that sport, rowing or baseball, then the tissues in your body and the joints are going to become adapted for that
specific pattern, right?
That specific pattern.
Yeah.
And it's a good thing and it's a bad thing, just depending on which way you look at it. To some degree, that makes you more efficient at doing what you're trying to do, but it also makes you less efficient at doing other things. So, yeah, it's a push-pull. From a longevity standpoint, I think, do you think it's better or worse to have more variety or less variety?
Yeah, I think it's definitely from a longevity standpoint and a sustainable standpoint, it makes a lot more sense to do that, because like the way I'm going to think about training yourself into a box, like you said, we have all these planes of motion. We have all these bones, joints, muscles. We have all these long kinetic chains that span across several muscles, several joints. So a kinetic chain might be, for example, the flexors in my right arm going across the entire front side of my body and connecting to my left inner thigh. Okay, so that's going to be a kinetic chain right there. But when I think of like exercising myself into a box, it's what you said. It's like repetitive motion. It's almost like overuse and abuse of a certain neural pathway and a movement. So if I think about my wrist, let's see, now you can see my wrist. Okay, my wrist can do, it can go into a radial deviation, ulnar deviation. So it can do this, then it can go into flexion, and it can go into extension, all right? And then it can go into a pronation or a supination. So it has these different adaptations that it can make depending what I want it to do. But if I'm just cycling, and that's all I do. I ride bikes. Like that's the way that I get fitness. And if you imagine like that, my wrist is going to represent like a hip socket. This is all I'm doing. Just one range of motion over and over. And you could say that there's a little bit of
circumduction.
Yeah, well, and leeway. Like it doesn't just go here, but it goes into a repetitive pattern. And so we're talking about like exercising yourself into a box, and how does that start to restrict you? Like you get really good at doing this thing, but then like how do you move your hip any other way if you're not doing movements that are conducive to moving your hip that way? And then anyways, this starts to lead to like what I said, the overuse and abuse. But don't you think that people are probably limiting their physical growth and and their way of getting better?
Yeah, what it makes me think about, it can be very tricky in certain disciplines, and because I've done a lot of have some CrossFit experience. It can be tricky also with the language things, because the way CrossFit is defined is it's constantly varied functional movement executed at high intensity across time and modal domains. I believe that's the definition.
Yeah.
And it's a very tricky and confusing definition, because it says that there's a lot of movement variation, and ostensibly it seems like there's a lot of movement variation. You will squat and you will press and you will walk on your hands and you'll hinge and you'll lunge and you will do pull-ups and
rope climbs. Like they have you do the gambit of movements.
You do the gambit of movements, but within that spectrum, those movements are actually, based on what you're capable of doing, quite limited. Because you can squat, for example, you don't do a lot of lateral movement in CrossFit. You don't do a lot of spinning movement in CrossFit. You don't do a lot of, even just those patterns we talked about, variations. So there's millions of squat variations. Yeah. You could stagger, you could go really wide, you could go really narrow, you could squat and throw something. Like there's all these things that you could do that would add to the diet, and the ultimate point being, what seems like there's a lot of variation within actually does not have as much variation as what it might seem like.
Yeah. And
it's careful, because we can define things within a certain domain that make it seem a certain way, but in the broader spectrum, it's not so much that way.
And to add to your point, like in these boot camp classes and boutique fitness, people are selling squats now. Like, oh, you do squats. We do squats in our workouts, and it's being sold as like functional fitness. But really, it's like the attention to the details of a squat, which can get pretty complex. If you really break it down, and like nobody's doing assessments in any or in a lot of these settings. Like when you just go to a group fitness class, nobody is assessing how your ankle moves, how your hip actually works. You're just kind of being left to your own devices. You sign the waiver, you pay the fee, then you go to this class, and now you're being allowed to perform a squat, whether or not you should be doing a squat. And then so you get the endorphin high, you sweat, you burn some calories, so you feel good, and then you're like, I'm going to keep doing this. Okay, I never went through an assessment to see if I have the ankle mobility or if I have the hip mobility to perform a safe squat without shearing my knees, or with like good core engagement or whatever you want to say, good glute engagement. But now this becomes your exercise routine. You like this class. I'm going to pick on Orange Theory right now. Okay, we could easily pick on anything.
You could pick on what Rob does with his clients.
Yeah, exactly. I could, by all means, make fun of what I do. So it's like, anyways, like people start going to these classes and they do it over and over again, and they start to exercise themselves into this box, and like it's a limitation. They're not exploring the other options that they have available, and nobody's really instructing them on that. No one's showing people adduction of the pelvis. You might see that in a physical therapy setting, but that's typically when you've already been injured, and sometimes that's only to get you back to how you got injured.
I think we should probably be careful too, to some degree, because if you can overcomplicate it to the point where like you might start to think, oh, I need to get this assessment done, and I need to make sure that I know exactly what I should be doing and what I shouldn't be doing. Mm-hmm. But I don't think it necessarily has to be that complex per se.
No, I wouldn't say I do. Like, I don't do like run through a list of assessments with my people. It's more like, hey, can you squat? Can you maintain like good spinal integrity? Yep. Does it feel good? Like, does it hurt? Can you hold this position for a little while? And that's something, right, you don't see in a group class setting. You don't see people moving slowly. It's like, it's kind of just going with gravity, just pounding.
I think I might
reps out.
I think I could maybe bring it to light a little bit in that if you were to take any single modality, doesn't matter. I guess we'll just pick what's a random modality, like training modality. Anyone, it doesn't matter.
Weightlifting?
Okay, yeah. Weightlifting, Olympic weightlifting.
Yeah, let's do Olympic weightlifting.
Okay, so Olympic weightlifting, the clean, the jerk, and the snatch.
Yeah.
3 movements.
Yeah.
If you take a population of 100 people and you were say, okay, we're all going to train Olympic weightlifting. Okay, you have to. Different age groups, blah, 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 blah. Right? If you were to just, like, objectively assess these people, not with, like, their interest levels in mind.
Yeah.
Like, the ones that are, there's only going to be a certain few of them that are going to be best designed for Olympic weightlifting.
Yeah.
And, like, those people are going to have really good ankle mobility, and they're going to have really good hip flexion, and they're going to have really good shoulder flexion, and they're going to be able to stack themselves in a squat really upright.
Yeah.
Right? Because it's required to do that sport pretty well.
Yeah.
And then there's going to be some people in the population, let's just say probably an older person, who like has not lived a life that's going to allow for what I just talked about to be possible.
Yeah.
They're going to have the hardest. I would say they should not do any Olympic weightlifting really, at all.
No.
So, but you have people that will go into an environment, any environment, but they're not fit for the environment.
Yeah.
So they're better fit for another type of modality, right?
Yeah, they are. Yeah, they're a better fit for another type of modality. They might not know that though, because again, like, what is the media? What is their environment telling them that they need to go do? And what I was going to say is like the other thing that gets under my skin a little bit is like yoga, because yoga you can over-exercise yourself into a box with yoga also. And I think that comes back to making everything too stretchy and too long and too lax. Sometimes the people that do yoga, they don't understand how to contract short or even contract long. They almost don't know how to create useful tension in their bodies.
Rob, what do you mean by contract short and contract long?
Yeah, so contract short, so if we're using my bicep as an example, a contraction short, okay, so I'm shortening the muscle fibers of my bicep. A lengthening contraction is going to be to lengthen the biceps. Now my tricep is shortening. So this is lengthening, this is shortening. When I go into elbow flexion, this is shortening, this is lengthening. So
and is it harder to contract in a long position or in the shorter position, would you say?
That's really interesting because I've been playing with that a lot lately. I personally think it's probably more difficult to train length potential into tissue. What would you say?
Yeah, I generally will tell people that when you're in the position that's longest for the muscle that's being active, that's where that muscle probably is going to be at its weakest.
Yeah.
At the end of the bicep curl right here, like you're going to have a much harder, it would be harder for me to pull for there than it would be for me to pull here.
Yeah.
And as I come closer towards the origin, I can handle more force in general.
Yeah.
Maybe not necessarily completely, but definitely the mid-range.
Yeah.
Right? You'll be the strongest.
Jenna is somebody else we work with, and we had this conversation about stretch the other day, because people go to yoga and they, stretching is like, oh, I want to stretch my back. And sometimes I'll talk to some of the other trainers I work with, and creating a real stretch, not like a lazy stretch where I just flop my knee and just fall to it. But it's like, how do you get a stretch under tension? And so we were talking about lengthening, and lengthening a tissue with real deliberation is hard work. So if you actually want an effective stretch that's going to send, new oxygenated blood to the muscle, it's hard work, and you might not even want to be stretching that long. Versus a passive stretch is what you see in yoga a lot. Is people they just kind of fall somewhere and they're just going to hold and breathe and hang out. And
so this is the second time I've heard this.
Yeah.
When you stretch, you're bringing blood flow to the muscle.
Yeah.
My physical therapist, shout out to my boy Dave Melchiori.
Yeah.
He said it, using stretching to bring blood flow to your muscle. You just said it.
Yeah.
The concept's foreign to me.
Yeah.
Why do you think? Why do you say that?
Because when I say that, when I'm trying to lengthen them, when a muscle is engaging or contracting, blood flow is rushing there. And if I'm breathing under it, my heart is taking in new oxygen and it's pumping that oxygen to the area of stress in my body that I'm trying to.
But even in a passive position, or
no, I don't think so. That's what I'm saying. I think a passive position is almost like
passive, not moving. Is what
passive, not moving. Yeah, there might be some blood flow there. If you sat on the floor with straight legs and I pushed you toward your thighs, some blood flow would go places. But I wonder if it would be out of a resisting state versus if you use your abdominals to crunch you to the floor.
Yeah. Okay.
So
I guess he's referring more to the active stretching.
Yeah.
Contracting, stretching and contracting, lengthening and contracting.
And that's all I wanted to say is a true stretch is under tension, and it's hard to do. I'll put people in an eccentric load, so we're now lengthening a tissue that's probably locked short, and people want to get out of it 30 to 60 seconds, and I'm like, come on, we got to build 1 to 3 minutes in this position with active breathing, conscious breathing.
Yeah, I was talking to Jenna about this as well, and kind of the conclusion, at least that we came to, or maybe I don't know exactly what, but like if you passive stretching, at least to me, I have a hard time contextualizing it as being a good thing for a lot of people. It's like it needs to be very specific. But in general, what I think passive stretching could be probably helpful for is for a muscle or a pattern that is holding a lot of tone. And I think of power lifters, I think of bodybuilders, I think of these people whose joints and muscles, specifically their connective tissues are really tight, and their muscles are really tight, and they can't get a full length in their muscle because there's so much tone. And maybe the only way to restore more tone would be to do the dynamic stretching and the active stretching that Rob's talking about, but also maybe just spending a long period of time in that position and getting your diaphragm to move and your rib cage to move and your pelvic floor to move.
While you're in that passive.
While you're in the passive position.
I think that's well said, yeah.
And if you're a yogi and you have excessive amounts of range of motion, if you were to hang in that position and breathe, hard for me to understand where that is going to be helpful, especially when you don't have control over that range of motion.
Yeah, like I think maybe that's more where like the active contraction might be useful to the dancer or the yogi who's hyper flexible, kind of flaccid, like just loose in their joints.
Do you think that like this trend of the functional range conditioning kind of fits in here?
Yeah, it's funny. I was just thinking of Andrea Spina of functional range conditioning, because he's all about
FRC. People will know it as.
Yeah, he's all about controlling yourself, and basically you don't go to a range of motion that you don't have. Okay, and if you passively go there or somebody pushes you there, you don't have that range. So he's more interested in building your control into that range.
Yeah, he has these things called ratios, like passive to active ratios. Are you aware of this?
Yeah.
Could you explain what a passive and active ratio would be?
Yeah, he'll have you take a joint and put it into a passive range of motion, and you find out where you can go passively without trying.
I were to take Rob's arm, and without him doing anything, I'm going to raise it over his head. He's not going to have any control of it. We're going to just see where the joint can go, right?
Yeah, exactly. All right, and then you get there.
And then we get there, we say that that's the passive, the top number in the ratio, right?
Yes,
number
exactly,
1, the P.
But now if I want to get a little bit more, so that's passively. Okay, so Sean took my arm, he raised it above my head, and that's how high it got. Okay, the active piece comes into then getting into a position where you're at your end range, and then you start talking about things like irradiation and contracting your whole body as much as possible, because his big thing is proximal stability for distal mobility. So he basically wants you to contract your body, your diaphragm, everything inward as much as possible, and you do this through various techniques and cueing, and eventually your body's working so hard that you're able to maybe just take your arm back a little bit further with your own effort. You're under your own control.
You could also just not get there.
Right? Yeah, and you might not get there. You might just, the drill for an individual might be to just stay in that position, breathe, and contract. Yeah. And you use blocks, balls, dumbbells. You can use all sorts of tools to contract your body.
You would say that if your P is greater than your A, so if your passive range of motion is greater than your active range of motion, then you wouldn't want to like train or load that range of motion significantly because of risk of injury. So what you'd want to do is you'd want to use functional range conditioning to bring your actives to meet your passives, or maybe even to surpass your passives, so that you have control, support in that position. And I don't understand the system that well, so there's a lot more to it.
Yeah.
You have to go to seminars and stuff to like learn this stuff, but that's the gist, I think, right?
Yeah.
So, to some degree, granted, I don't. They probably would say no, but that's
Well, yeah, I
what I
mean,
know.
we're trying to like paraphrase, these guys who like have tens of thousands of people around the world doing their protocol. To bring it back full circle, though, so we talked about the weightlifters, we talked about cyclists, the yogis, and it's this idea of exercising yourself into a box. Okay, so you have all these possibilities of movement, but because of maybe your current lifestyle, the way that your life is set up, work, job, life balance, you only have 45 minutes or 60 minutes to get your physical fitness in every day, or maybe it's only like 2 to 4 days a week. And you want to do what's easiest because, you don't want to gain the weight, like the excess weight. You want to make sure that you feel healthy and are lean, so that goes into vanity, which is a separate conversation for this. But essentially, I mean, right? You're only allowing yourself 4 hours of dedication to your physical health a week. And so you're going to do what's easiest, and you're going to find your group class or whatever modality you like to do, and you're going to do it. And I don't know, what do you think? Does that exercise us into a box? If we do the same thing 4 days a week?
Yes, especially when you take into account the stuff that you're not doing in your everyday life in terms of movement variation. So it's like,
boom, mind blown.
You go to work and you drive to work, and then you do whatever you do at work.
Yeah,
most people probably sit.
Yeah,
but maybe you don't.
Maybe you stand.
Maybe you stand.
Just as damaging.
So there's not a lot of variation, and then you drive back home, or maybe ultimately what I'm getting at is there's just a lot of conditioning that's happening, and it's easy to do it because you've done it so many times, and the reason why it's easy is because you've done it so many times. That's what's efficient for you. I sit like this, and we try to have this conversation. I'm not saying this is good. It might
or
not
bad.
Be good. Yeah, or bad.
I think it is.
Right?
Yeah, it is.
But it's a variation. Like maybe I should have mixed in this, right? And then maybe I'll mix in this, and then I'll maybe come up and I'll sit here.
I could have done the same thing. We should be moving a little bit more on our
we should embody what we're talking about a bit more. But so we're just gonna do different things and sit different ways and try to move and add the variation in, so that we don't get so boxed into these positions. And if I do that enough times, it might feel really taxing at first, but if I just keep doing it and I'm always in motion, it's like Newton's first law, not that it's completely related, but objects in motion stay in motion, right? Unless otherwise prevented from an
equal or greater force.
Yeah, equal or greater force.
Yeah.
Your body is going to adapt, and it's going to become more efficient for you to be moving more often and for you to be doing these things. So sitting upright and being in a little bit better posture is going to be easier for you because your joints and your nervous system is going to adapt to be able to hold those positions more easily. It won't stay that you have to sit like this to read and to be comfortable, because you'll be able to hold other positions that will be comfortable for you.
Yeah.
You will be less in a box as a result of the variation that you add into your movement diet every day. And as for the 4 hours a week, of course, it's kind of a drop in the bucket, but I think it's very meaningful. This is an important point, I think, is it's very meaningful on a symbolic level, that if you are putting in your 4 hours, you're putting in variation, and you're putting concepts, and you're thinking about it actively, it's going to bleed into the rest of your life because it's something that you believe in and you're practicing. So it's symbolic about many other things. You might not get that much done in 4 hours, but you can make a statement about what you believe in those 4 hours, and that will bleed into the philosophy in your life and the way that you live in the world.
I think that's well said. 4 hours is certainly better than no hours. I mean, that goes without thinking. I guess I would like to encourage people to ask why they're doing what they're doing a little bit more, or thinking about what it is about this modality of exercise that I'm choosing to do. Why am I doing it? And that can be actually a pretty slippery slope of lots of big questions coming up. So
Yeah, Rob, how do you think about, like, if people want to achieve a certain goal, or like maybe want to train for something specific, how that might be helpful for a teacher like yourself to know, to have an idea of what you're working towards? Like, why is that helpful for you and for them?
well, it's helpful for me because I can start thinking about where they want to get to. Like they have a direction in mind, and whether it's to recover faster on the tennis court, get to the balls quicker, have a more powerful backhand or forearm, or whatever it is, or to lose the weight, or to feel better in their shoulders. You know,
So there are better ways to lose weight than other ways? Right.
sorry.
You're saying that there's better ways to lose weight than like there's certain things that you could do that are better at losing weight than
Yeah.
other things?
Yeah, I mean, like just going to your run-of-the-mill class. Yeah, yes, absolutely. Like health and fitness and exercising and moving has to do with losing weight.
Yeah.
But I start thinking about like hormones and behaviors. Balancing out the hormones is a really big one if somebody wants to lose weight. I mean, getting anxiety levels down, reducing excess stress, and when I start thinking about anxiety levels, I start thinking about conscious breathing. And that was something I was thinking about is like in this whole exercise, boxing yourself with exercise paradigm we're talking about, it's like there is a bit of a method to building your body in a more intelligent way, a way that's going to promote more sustainability and longevity. And, we're not going to go cover that right now. I mean, you could reach out to us and kind of learn that from us and various other practitioners out there. But I think about, you and I talk about breathing regularly and how important getting individuals who are interested in improving their health to connect with their breath. So when I think about losing weight or muscular development or joint adaptability, I think about things like anxiety. I think about stress levels and how to help someone inhabit themselves in a different way. Basically, more understanding. I feel like when we understand and have more information about our body, we're able to do so much more with it. And I don't think this is, after watching this video, I don't think anybody can just expect to have that information. I mean, we happen to work in this field, so we're pretty fortunate in the fact that we spend our free time reading about this type of stuff.
Yeah, there's like a cognitive component to doing these physical exercise practices, or even non-exercise physical movement practices. And like as you learn more about where you are and like where you want to go, and like all the different opportunities and the abundance of available ways to go about getting from one point to another point becomes more clear to you, and you won't keep going into the box and keep going down that same path. You'll see that there's like multiple paths, and like I was just thinking about it here. If you're one of the people who you say you run and you like it and you enjoy it, but like it's not really getting the body composition that you really want. Like you're eating well and you're sleeping well, but like there's like maybe those like there's deposits of adipose tissue or fat tissue, just places in your body that you're like, it's just nagging. I can't get rid of it.
Yeah.
Like you're probably not gonna run it off.
Yeah, you're not gonna run your problems away.
And like if you try something different, your body, because you're probably kind of closer to the end range of the possible adaptations that you're going to get from the running practice. If you were to try like maybe CrossFit, or you were to try rowing or something that is going to train your body differently, you might
almost anything. I mean, you could say anything. If you try this, it's going to change your body composition.
Exactly, it's going to change your body composition, and that might be where that's where you're going to get the result. And it might not take nearly as much effort as you're putting into running to try to get it to happen.
Yeah,
which is, I think, freeing, right?
Yeah. I mean, as long as you can, freeing, yes, but it's going to take hard work. You're not going to be able to go on autopilot anymore and just go out for your run. You're going to have to kind of embody something new and understand it, and you're going to bump up against your ego. Your ego is going to suck at whatever you start doing, especially if you've never done it before. But I think it's so important to like
or your ego is going to be offended or like insulted.
Yeah, your ego's
by
going to
the fact that you're not going to be very good at it.
Yeah, and like I think we really have to humble ourselves to everything that we don't know. The body is such a complex entity, and like the nervous system is, incredibly deep, and like I think we really have to like respect it for what it is and the thousands of years it took to evolve to where it is today, and to think that we can just exercise our problems away and check out and just like just tick it off the to-do list, like, oh, I exercised, I'm good, everything's good. I don't know, I think it's kind of lazy, to be honest. And I'm not calling you, the viewers, lazy. This is what I think. What do I know?
Can you talk to us a little bit about kinesthetic quotient?
Yeah, so, well, I was thinking that we could end on that and talk about that next time, because I, like 5 minutes ago, I was like, this is such a good time to talk about KQ with people.
Okay, so KQ, Rob will answer. IQ, intellectual intelligence.
Yep.
EQ, emotional intelligence. Yeah. And then
KQ, which is kinesthetic quotient or kinesthetic intelligence. And if you think of it in the term of like three centers or three just realms, you have your head up here, you have your heart here, and then we're going to consider the kinesthetic quotient your L3, L4, which is behind your belly button, which is the widest part of the spine. It's where your center of mass is. And in modern day society, we really not only live, but we're rewarded for having a really high IQ. And I think equally, and especially like
more so now,
like emotional intelligence is really valued. Kinesthetic intelligence is really reserved for people who make it in professional athletics or dancers who make it professionally. But pretty much like a lot of people, they either grow up playing no sports or some sports, but as soon as they're not good enough or they don't care enough to play, it's like KQ goes out the window. So there's an imbalance between these three chambers. People are really highly developed up here, also developed here, but L3, L4, the movement, the kinesthetic piece, just people, they don't have a language for it. And this is where we could start getting into semantics also. Like, we don't have a language to describe our body, so we just think of it as parts. We don't understand it as an integrated vessel that we live in more than anything else in this world. So I think that would be a great conversation for our viewers and listeners, talking about kinesthetic intelligence.
It might give you some self-understanding as well in that process to start to like identify if that maybe was you or that was one of your natural talents. I immediately think of a lot of these students and people who went through their childhood and were put in rows, and you sit down and you go for 45 minutes and we talk about this that's on the board, and you memorize it, and then you come back tomorrow and you're going to tell us what you did for homework, and you're going to take a test on it, and like you're sitting there like, I can't pay attention, I have to move myself.
Yep.
And like you get these individuals and then you put them outside and you say they run like the wind, they make it look easy, right? And you're like, what's going on there? And these people are like, they're naturally kinesthetically intelligent. They're not going to be able to sit in a chair and look at the whiteboard and come back tomorrow and give you answers that are almost entirely based on IQ.
Yeah.
And it's not based on KQ, but if you put them outside on a field, they're going to be very impressive, and they're going to outperform, and they're going to get A's on their report card on the field, and they're going to get D's on their report card in the classroom, because they were given capacities that are more oriented towards a certain learning environment. And like, we don't have jobs for you.
Yeah, that's right.
maybe we can create more jobs for you. But this is just a thing. This is a cultural, societal thing where if you have a good IQ, there's lots of opportunity for you to do well in school and to go to a good university. And if you don't, there's not going to be as much opportunity for you.
Yeah.
And yeah, I don't think it's fair. And like, that's just how I feel. I don't think it's fair. I don't think that that these students are, people think they're dumb. People think they're stupid. They're actually like brilliant individuals. Maybe just not in the IQ sense. They're brilliant in other ways.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I mean, it's yeah.
I think it's, well, two things came to mind. Is like, one is musicians also fall into the KQ category. That was just something I wanted to add. But
what, musicians?
Musicians,
KQ?
yeah. But also in
like,
order to have,
like, maybe there's like this kind of auditory intellect.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
Visual intellect.
Individuals with a high KQ typically do have a really high IQ, I think. It's just like they learn differently.
Okay.
Because I work with a lot of people who are very, like, they're brilliant. Brilliant. I mean, we're in Cambridge, Massachusetts. I mean, like, we are exposed to a lot of people who really thrive in their head because of their ideas and their ingenuity and their intelligence. But they will say after a session that they haven't thought so hard in like a really long time when they're developing their KQ to start to learn what internal rotation is, which for somebody like Sean and I, like we just understand what that means. But for somebody else, you know, turning the pelvis one way, elevating the shoulder, whatever it might be, pronating the foot or supinating the foot, like this, there's a lot to learn. And so I actually find people with KQs, higher KQs, do have an IQ.
Yeah, there's that. There's two elements of like knowing something, especially in this sense, and like I could, like Rob says, like, you know, can you internally rotate your femur or whatever, and can you do that like in variable, random, high intensity, low intensity environments? The person with the high KQ is going to be able to handle more environments and be able to, for example, in sport, they're going to be able to use their femur ranges of motion much better and like in a more integrated way. And like the intelligence is deeply understood on a feeling level.
Yeah.
They know how to make it happen.
Mm-hmm.
They might not be able to explain how to make it happen, but they have it in them. And maybe if you start to help these people understand what their body already knows, they're gonna start to like get really into it and like be able to develop the intellectual side of it because they already are it. Yeah. And they just need to realize that like there's an intellectual aspect to like complexity to like what they already can do. Yeah. You know?
I think that's a good
cool
way.
Thing.
Yeah. So maybe on the next talk we can go into a little bit more KQ. Yeah.
And this was a pretty physical episode, I would say.
Yeah, it was pretty body heavy.
Yeah.
So I guess something for you to think about is like, are you exercising yourself into a box?
Right. I agree.
Yeah. Are you varying? Is your spectrum, you know, broad, and are you being sure to kind of bounce back and forth between?
And are you limiting your definitions of words like movement and strength and conditioning and fitness and health and those things?
So something to think about until next time. Thanks for watching. This is Rob and Sean.
Take care out there.